This episode of Central Valley PolitiCast, we have some folks from across the country and the globe. Ruthie Bloom, who lives in Israel, visiting New York right now, but has been in Israel throughout the course of the war, and California's RNC committeeman Sean Steele, who, of course, visited Israel not long after the Hamas terror attack on October 7th of 2023. Ruthie, we'll start with you. There's this hostage deal that's been reached. It's going to take course, if assuming it's executed to perfection over the course of 40 to 50 days. Can you talk about your initial reaction to the deal and then initial reaction on the ground too in Israel?
Well, my initial reaction was horror. I was horrified by the deal, by what I read in the press about the deal. It wasn't that Prime Minister Netanyahu announced it or something. It was all these different press reports based on anonymous sources. So on the one hand, I was horrified by what I read, and I was also thinking maybe that it's not accurate, etc. Now we know that there is this deal. That also some of the details have not been completely finalized. Now, I have since, after my initial horror, I came to see some benefits. But again, the jury's still out because it all depends on what happens in the next several days, not just the next several weeks. Also because there are two really, really bad things about it. And one is releasing thousands of bloodthirsty terrorists from jail in order to rescue hostages, but not all the hostages, and many are not alive. And and I was feeling that this was a way of saying that putting Israel and Hamas on a par. There are these two sides, and we're making a deal the way President Trump's Mideast envoy made it sound, like, let's get the deal done. We're at war, and Israel needs to secure victory, not, a little compromise with a terrorist group that committed the worst atrocities on Jews since the Holocaust.
And just jumping in there, do you mean President Biden's envoy or President Trump's envoy?
No, President Trump's, Steve Witkoff.
Yeah.
He went to Qatar a couple of days ago, and then no. President Biden's envoy was also there. So that made me nervous as well. President Trump, a few days ago, reiterated something that really made me happy, and that was, if those hostages aren't returned, all hell will break loose in the Middle East. And then suddenly, his envoy was sounding more like Biden. Let's get a deal, let's make a deal. So I was nervous, I have to say, and I still am nervous. But, obviously we have to wait and see. I am very, very happy that some hostages are coming home. Yes.
And Sean, your thoughts on that too. I mean, I know that we'll be seeing exactly what happens, and historically, the partners that Israel's working with haven't always been the most reliable or follow through on these deals to the most part. What are your thoughts on this deal too?
Well, I was with some other members of the Republican National Committee at our own expense, and we we met with Hirsch Goldberg's parents at the King David Hotel, and we went to all the battleground zones, the kidnapping zones, the killing fields. It was pretty clear to me two or three concepts. Hamas will never ever quit. It's a diseased organization, root and branch, and any person participating in it you can't negotiate with in good faith. That's just a fact of life. Netanyahu was in very bad straits, and including the entire Israeli military structure. How did we even miss this? I mean, the vast infrastructure underneath Gaza with the most sophisticated tunnel system in the planet, much bigger than the London subway. This has been a plan of operation for eradication of Israel for decades, but particularly in the last 20 years in Gaza. So what do we have today? We have a deal that I agree is, I'm very skeptical of it. And I'm not happy with Witkoff's statements. I hope he understands that every word, every syllable he says is being studied by a lot of smart people. And so far, it's not looking good for him. And I don't know if he's representing the president well at all, because Trump is saying one thing. He wants all the hostages out. He didn't say 33. He said all the hostages out. And we haven't even talked about the American citizen hostages, which is sacrosanct. That's not even negotiable, but that sounds like it's on the table. So we're going to get people, maybe 33, some women, children, that's always good. over 50, but the younger ones, and those are probably the American citizens, are going to be left behind. That really disturbs me a lot. That fundamentally breaks the pledge. But moreover, you can't, you sit down with Nazis or you sit down with any kind of classic totalitarian, you just really can't make a deal in good faith. The only part that I'm okay with is the 33 that are going to be released shortly. There's 6 weeks of no combat. Well, let's study what actually happened in Lebanon. There's supposed to be no combat there either, but Hezbollah kept fighting, kept arming, and the IDF did the only thing they could do, attack and destroy those pockets of resistance, even during the ceasefire. I'm confident that the IDF is going to continue. They won't take the abuse, they won't take the attacks, and any Hamas soldier that comes out of the ground is going to be eradicated and eliminated. But I'm also deeply disturbed of the pressure that Netanyahu's received, but also in the Israeli public. There's nothing better to get an Israeli public turned against you than to kidnap. And I looked at when Gilad, the soldier, was kidnapped some 20 years ago. What do we get out of it? And I say what did the free world get out of it? They got over 1,000 Palestinian active soldiers, including Sinwar. By releasing Gilad, by falling for that bait, thousands of Jews and people and Arabs and Muslims were killed and slaughtered and massacred. It was a very bad deal. I would think that we should learn that in war, and it's always war until Hamas has completely disappeared from the planet, you can't make a deal like that. We lose good people through kidnapping. That's just the ways of life, and that's the ways of warfare. We're in constant warfare. There may be a deal to cease ballistic, or sophisticated weaponry, but Hamas has only one purpose, and that's to kill and destroy. I don't like the deal. But I'm kind of comfortable that at 6 weeks, it's going to give Israeli intelligence a chance to really assess the situation. The Hamas soldiers that come out of the caves will be identified. We'll know who they are. We'll know who's alive. We'll know who's not. And after 6 weeks, I'm hoping that the Israelis don't go to phase 2, but they search and destroy and absolutely wipe out Hamas. Hamas is impossible to negotiate with. They can't even keep their own deals. They're badly split. They're without leadership. It's not a good deal, but in the short term, it'll take some pressure away from Netanyahu. I just can't believe that so much of the Israeli families are buying into the basically betraying the rest of Israel, because this is a war, and they may get their loved ones back, but what about the cost to their children and grandchildren?
Ruthie, thoughts on that too? I know one thing to add to, in that hostage deal, I think Sean's referring to from several years ago. One of the people that was trained or traded in that deal amongst the terrorist group was Yahya Sinwar.
That's correct. Now, I'll say something just to play devil's advocate, because I actually agree with everything you said, Sean. But I will say the Israeli public, even those who opposed the deal for Gilad Shalit all those years ago, say the difference is that he was a soldier and he was taken prisoner. Whereas the people at the Nova Festival were just dancing, and the other people taken out of their homes, raped, beheaded, kidnapped. Those were not soldiers. Those were people having a holiday weekend, and the army did not protect them. The army was taken by surprise. They were snatched out of their bed in pajamas. And so a lot of the public says that it's not comparable to Gilad Shalit. Here we owe those people because we didn't protect them. That's different from sending a soldier into battle who gets captured. That's number one. Number two, I want to make it clear that many hostage families do not agree with such a deal, especially those whose kids are not coming back in the first round, because they don't trust Hamas, rightly so, to actually keep up the next phase of the bargain, and especially not if Hamas violates it. And then Israel goes in, as you said, Sean, about Lebanon, and Israel continues to battle them. They might say, okay, no, we're not releasing anymore. All right. We don't know what's going to happen. We do know what happened last November, November 2023, when there was a hostage exchange deal. And in the third phase or something, that Hamas said, okay, no more. Just just broke the deal and started firing rockets. Now, I will say though, and as I wept when Gilad Shalit was returned from captivity after 5 years, that I will feel the same way this time. The trouble is that we are now endangering ourselves. We're setting ourselves up for another October 7th with all those released terrorists. And we're signaling to the rest of the world that it pays to take hostages.
Absolutely.
Right. And so the only thing here is the one silver lining, and it's all in my own head. It's not based on any inside information, that I'm hoping that behind the scenes, Netanyahu and Trump have come to some kind of arrangement where Trump said to Netanyahu, you know what, just sign the deal. Hamas, they're just an arm, they're just a proxy of Iran. What we're going to allow you to do is take our bunker busters, destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, and maybe kill the Ayatollahs. And we won't stop you. On the contrary, unlike, let's say, the Biden administration that was constantly trying to make deals with Iran. And therefore, don't worry about this little deal with Hamas, because after all, without Iran, all these proxies in the region are starved of their money and their training and weapons. So I'm hoping that's what's going on.
I share that hope, and I've reached a point in my analysis that Netanyahu is really the one that's seen all around the corners, is probably the most brilliant peacemaker we've had in the Middle East in 500 years, maybe longer. He has seen so much, and he's eliminated so many bad characters. So I guess I have to trust him, because he's been very, very good since October 7th.
I think
absolutely, and I think we've seen that he's been playing 3D chess all along. So let's assume, or hope at least, that he's doing that right now as well.
And that seems to be the big, the two big points of contention here seem to be, as far as getting this deal through, are whether or not Hamas and its fellow negotiators keep their word as far as the phasing out of this hostage release. And then two, the other thing, which is, how does that change once the administration changes? We have a new president in a little bit less than a week from now. How do his attitudes in the region change as well? I think one good place maybe to leave it off here with you, Sean, as far as what does this mean for you think the way that this is looked at in the United States, the negotiations between Israel and Hamas, and just the situation in the Middle East as a whole. Does this help lessen the tension that we see here in the United States? And then I guess to Ruthie, I'll have you answer after that. Will it lessen the tension should this be successful in Israel? But to you first, Sean.
Yeah, look, Trump likes finality. He likes happy endings. He likes that reputation. We were all excited when Trump said all hell will break loose if the hostages aren't released. I'm still holding him to that. I'm hoping that all the hostages are released by Monday. That's the deal. That's what he said publicly. So far, I'm only hearing 33 of the 90. We don't even know of the remainder, 60 or whatever the number is, how many of them are actually alive. And so I'm hoping that the struggle within the Trump administration is going to not keep their eyes off of Gaza. It seems like Marco Rubio got it. It seems like Trump has it, and so I'm guardedly optimistic.
And to you, Ruthie, what are your thoughts there about if this is negotiated to a success and this is executed successfully? What do you think the politics of Israel and the way that they view this situation it moves forward? I mean, I think that might be a thing too. I imagine tensions would be lessened, but then also it gives Israel a chance to see what is next, and of course that may mean strikes, of course, towards Iran.
Well, I'll say one thing. It's very clear that the incoming Trump administration, based on most of his picks for Secretary of State, Defense, etc., these are all massively pro-Israel people. They know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And there's no question that it'll be a friendlier, that relations between Washington and Jerusalem will be far friendlier under this incoming administration. That's a given. The trouble with the deal, in addition to everything else, is that part of the deal is that more humanitarian aid has to go into Gaza. Now, the problem with that is that Hamas has been stealing all the aid and then selling it to Gazans at exorbitant prices and taking that money to recruit new terrorists to replace all those we've eliminated. Now, if that's the case, then you see you're at cross purposes when you allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. And I'm hoping that there are going to be people to explain that to President Trump so that he understands it, that this code word humanitarian aid, as though it's all for these poor civilians. Of course, it doesn't reach those poor civilians. And it makes a huge difference because it will leave Hamas in power, which is exactly what we cannot have.
All right. Thank you both for joining me today. Appreciate your time. Across time codes, I think Washington, D.C. is where Sean is right now, and Ruthie in New York, normally based in Israel. You can find her work on JNS. And of course, Sean Steele has his newsletter that he sends out as well. Thank you both for joining me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.